The ceasefire talks are literally not progressing.
Leaderships don't want to be irrelevant and they don't want to be seen to be weak. Netanyahu, who's looking to keep his job, and indeed that he may have, done certain crimes that would bring him to jail. Why do people only care or only seem to care when Israel is the aggressor or is perceived as the aggressor?
Gaza war has further jeopardized the security of Israel.
Safe spaces, safe places within the state of Israel has shrunk. I also have been shocked and amazed and intrigued by the global protest movement. My sense is that, yes, Israel sees its very existence threatened. Iran is, in a way, succeeding in inflicting psychological warfare right now because all these Israelis are afraid and anxious for the last weeks. There's a great chance, a high chance, that Iran wants this time to surprise Israel when it's not ready. I think all of us can pray to hopefully, lead us closer to peace.
We're joined today by Dr. Joshua Krug. He's a professor of Jewish studies based out of Germany. But as of now, he joins us from New York City. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Krug. The ceasefire talks are literally not progressing. Who is responsible, according to you, for the ongoing mess?
Well, first of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be with you. Good to join you this morning from New York. I guess I would say, first of all, I'm not privy to all the details of exactly what's happening on the ground, of course, but my impression is a couple things. One, Hamas wants to stay in power. Hamas wants to continue to lead. They want to continue to do what they do, and they're hell-bent on the destruction of the state of Israel. So that's a factor in this ongoing situation. They want to be able to use their leverage, right? They have all these hostages in order to get certain goals for themselves. Namely, especially, they want to have political prisoners, folks that are in Israel's jails, who've done various things, but they want to get those people back. Yahya Sinwar, the current leader of Hamas, was in a jail in Israel, sat in a jail for things that he had done, and was freed in the Gilad Shalit deal about a decade ago. But practically speaking, my broader impression is that if there's a will, there's a way. There's definitely not a situation of trust. You noted the horrendous tragedy of thousands upon thousands of dead people in Gaza, and we have many dead folks in Israel as well. And it's an ongoing situation. It's horrible. We're all, it brings a lot of emotion, and I frankly, this is all I can think about in the last 10 months. But the answer to your question is that my sense is that strategically, Hamas wants to get as much as they can from the leverage they have, the hostages, and Israel wants to ensure its safety and security for the short term and beyond. Frankly, if I can share with you, of course, I want the hostages back as soon as possible. I want a ceasing of fire, a cessation of hostilities. And I realize I sound like I'm crazy to say such a word at a time like this. Beyond a ceasefire, I'd like to see peace. In other words, a ceasefire is temporary. So the question is, well, when will the fire begin again? So anyhow, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see.
Correct. You said that it's Hamas which is not agreeing to the deal. Hamas says that it's Netanyahu who's not not agreeing to the nitty gritties of the various demands that they are making out. Critics of Netanyahu also claim that this is perhaps it's his way of continuing or to cling on to the chair. You said Hamas wants power, but is the converse also perhaps true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like any political context, it's hard to give up control, power. You want to continue to stay involved, to stay relevant, and leaderships don't want to be irrelevant, and they don't want to be seen to be weak. They believe they're the ones to do the job. I'm glad you noted Netanyahu, who's looking to keep his job, and indeed that he may have, done certain crimes that would bring him to jail, and so he's looking to avoid that fate and to stay out of jail. I don't blame him for it, but the question is, for Israeli society, how can they engage with that situation? In my read of reality, Hamas has basically held Palestinians hostage for 17 years. I'm saying something a little funky. When there was a democratic election in Gaza, in Palestine, we can call it, or Palestinian areas, Hamas won, and then soon thereafter in Gaza, they instituted a tyrannic rule. So they killed all their opponents, and effectively, that's the way they've been governing. And it's my friend was tortured by Hamas, and there wasn't a lot of interest at the time, right? And so when he sees a lot of the protests that we're seeing around the world and the anger for the deaths of children, frankly, which I share, he also asked the question, which I also share, why do people only care or only seem to care when Israel is the aggressor or is perceived as the aggressor?
Yahya Sinwar, you mentioned him. He's now the new boss of Hamas after Ismail Haniyeh's assassination. He's again a hardliner. So, do you believe that Hamas is also perhaps hardening its stance as far as this entire situation is concerned?
I believe so. I think that they, again, I imagine they want to get as much as they can for the hostages. They want to drag out this ongoing conflict as long as possible. They want the war to become, unpopular in Israel. They want people to lose morale, lose interest, and sort of give up. So I think that's they have a very strategic vantage point on everything. I think also, Yahya Sinwar's leadership shows the world, who Hamas is, that the person who masterminded the October 7th attacks, that he's now the leader of this movement. I don't think it's easy to say, well, they're freedom fighters, they're resistance. I mean, I mean, listen, the tactics they're willing to use in pursuit of quote unquote the cause are atrocious, to say the least. So I'd like to see coexistence. And so for a person like myself, it's hard to know exactly the way forward. But I think all of us, or so many of us who share that interest, we have to ask how we can show up in these days, how we can show up for Palestinians, how we can show up for Israelis, how we can support them and challenge them in the way that really pushes the ball forward.
While one does understand the rationale behind the Gaza war, after all, we all saw the visuals and the images that poured out of Israel during and after the October 7th attack by Hamas. Do you believe that the Gaza war has further jeopardized the security of Israel? Instead of
I,
making Israel safer, has the war further jeopardized the situation?
so I'm not a prophet over here, but I
I tell
suppose.
you why I'm asking this. I'm
Please
asking
do.
this because we recently witnessed an attempted suicide attack by in Tel Aviv by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Uh, Hamas has also warned Israel of that they will resume suicide bombings. The one we saw during the second Palestinian Intifada. So I'm asking from that point of view: is the security situation of Israel further hit or jeopardized?
Yes, absolutely. Israel's territory, in terms of the kind of safe places within the state of Israel, has shrunk, because with this war, Hezbollah is attacking the north, has continually been attacking the north, sending missiles into the north. And there are tens of thousands, if not 100 or so thousand Israelis who are internally displaced. So they have places to go within Israel for them to have safety. But you can ask precisely your question: is it safer for those people? What with a war? I also have been shocked and amazed and intrigued by the global protest movement. I think that strategically speaking, I think that Hamas and their allies want to, you could say, cancel Israel. They want to push Israel outside the accepted community of nations and to delegitimize the state. And so they have a very significant, an ambitious goal, not only, to have a state of their own, but actually more ambitious, more important to kind of ensure the disappearance of a current nation state. And
From
it's
the
been very,
river to the sea.
yes, it's been very interesting to see the response around the world to Israel's response to the October 7th attack. To be clear, like what I'd like to see a pro-Palestinian movement that is explicitly anti-Hamas and distances itself from Hamas and Hamas's, approach, tactics, etc. In Ukraine and in Syria, you had other countries say, hey, during these times, in a time of war, we're going to enable you to have the option to leave a war zone. In this conflict, we don't see that. We don't see Hamas as leaders of Gaza saying, hi, we're going to actually enable a safe space. We're not going to fire from this space in order to get at our Israeli foes. Sort of just like the opposite. It's like, oh, please stay here. We're going to be embedding ourselves with you, and we're going to be firing rockets from like the floor downstairs. But don't leave, and then Israel responds and people are angry at Israel, which I completely understand. And I too share that anger and frustration. But I think what's really unique about this situation is how willing the leadership of a place is to make easy the martyrdom. That's the framing, right? The martyrdom of the people downstairs, of the 8-year-old child Ahmed downstairs.
Right. I mean, it's really a catch-22 situation, and really there are no easy answers. And I get that. I hear you because I see you also trying to, come to terms with what Israel is doing about the civilian deaths or the deaths of the women and children there, and also understanding at the same time that what else do you do? How do you manage the situation? But having said that, let's just
Well,
move
can
up.
I say one thing on that?
Sure.
I think, just as an explanatory approach, my sense is that, yes, Israel sees its very existence threatened. Iran is hell-bent on Israel's destruction. We're not talking about go back to these lines or kind of we want you to live in this way or approach things in that way. We're talking about you should disappear. So you have millions of people who don't have multiple passports, and you're telling them you shouldn't have a country. Well, and there are, war, there's a military conflict to, you could say, enable that country to disappear. That's the goal. So I think Israel is responding the way it is. It doesn't see it as a light issue. Oh, well, hopefully I'll get along soon. They're sort of very threatened by the current reality.
On Iranian soil, Ismail Haniyeh assassinated the top Hamas leader. Iran has vowed blowback on Israel. Nothing so far is forthcoming, except, of course, if you discount what Hezbollah or Hamas are doing. Nothing directly from Iran. Is there a serious threat of a surprise attack by Iran when Israel is more complacent, perhaps, which is why, I mean, because it's just been way too long.
Right. So again, I don't know exactly what's in the mind of the Iranian generals from the Islamic Republic of Iran or the Ayatollah, but nonetheless, yes, I think that they want to do a surprise attack. My sense is that, one, Iran is in a way succeeding in inflicting psychological warfare right now, because all these Israelis are afraid and anxious for the last weeks. But then also it's a kind of economic form of attack, because all these flights to Israel have been canceled, in and out of Israel. What does this do for the economy? It's a very significant, the threat of a threat is significant in its own right, because it affects how people behave. That there's a high chance that Iran wants this time to surprise Israel, when it's not ready, and it wants to destroy military bases or hit certain targets. Listen, Israel hasn't taken responsibility for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, but this was on Iranian soil. It was a pretty sophisticated assassination, right? So my impression is that Iran wants to show you can't do that. It's all about deterrence, right? In the Middle East, like wanting to show we're not going to take it, and you can have escalation. And so if there is escalation, I could see this playing out into a regional war, even more than it already is. I could see it becoming even more significant. Again, I mean, in a way, none of us want that, because we want to ensure the well-being, the safety, the security of everyone, civilians, of military personnel around the world. And I mean, one of the challenges is you have a state, Iran, that sort of says, Israel should not exist. And not only that, we're hell-bent on destroying it. So to my mind, the question is, how can people and states coexist? How can we have the least number of casualties, the least number of deaths, the most coexistence in the short term, the medium term, and the long term? So I mean, from an Israeli perspective, I'll say this as well, because I think it's worth noting, the Iranians are close to having nuclear bombs. What could that mean? So this is a really challenging issue, powder keg in the world today.
You talked about it turning into a larger regional war, a war which engulfs the entire Middle East. But you do know that if that happens, then it's actually the entire world which is going to be in the middle of it, and it's really going to be World War III.
There's a high chance of that, yes.
All right. On that somber note, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your inputs, and we hope that doesn't happen. We hope World War III stays at bay, a wider regional war stays at bay. But the chances, as of now, as we're looking at the situation developing in the Middle East, the chances of that seem or appear very dim, at least right now. But thank you so much for joining us for those insights.
And may I say very quickly before we end, just a prayer for peace.
Absolutely.
Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. May the one who makes peace in the heavens create peace for all of us. So I think all of us can pray, can engage, can explore, can learn, can reflect, and can support and challenge our Palestinian and Israeli friends, our Arab and Jewish friends, and everyone else to hopefully lead us closer to peace. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time.